Hello out there! It's time for the Hockey Minute, your source for all of today's hockey news with some opinion. Strap in for the fastest news in the NHL. This episode is proudly brought to you by fucking nobody. We don't have any sponsors. Now, here's your hosts, Brandon and Ryan.
And here we are. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Hockey Minute. I am your host, Brandon. With me, as always, my co-host, Ryan. And today we have a very special episode for you. Today we're going to be talking about the CHL's newest exceptional player, Connor Bedard. This is only the sixth time the CHL has handed out exceptional status. But before we get into that, let's say hello to our co-host. Ryan, how you doing, man?
I am so fired up to do this episode. This is a big deal. And we're going to talk in depth more about this young man, but by the time this episode comes out, the draft will have already happened. I'd be shocked if he doesn't go number one.
Right.
But people who are fans of Western Hockey League hockey are in for a treat. We've got 3, possibly even 4 years of this kid. So let's dive right into it, man. I'm excited.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And I mean, I think the first thing that we should note is he's only 14 years old going into the draft, which I think you were pointing out in the previous episode is a year younger than the OHL or the Q would be drafting players, which is, that's something to be noted in its own right, especially considering the WHL is generally considered the toughest Canadian hockey league, right?
Yeah, so in the Western Hockey League, if you're a 15-year-old, you get a maximum of 5 games. At least that's how it was when I was trying to, break into the juniors. And I'm positive they haven't changed it, but you mentioned the toughness. I mean, right now he's 5'8", 165 pounds.
Right.
And as we know, sometimes those numbers get fudged a little bit.
Oh.
So hey, if he's that stocky at 14, all the power to him. He's only going to grow. But those kids out in Moose Jaw that are playing in the Western League, he's got some wheels, but he'll need them to play in this league. So
yeah, and I mean, people need to look up his highlight packages just to watch the kid play. I mean, he's obviously got all the talent in the world, and he's far and away, the best player on the ice for it looks like every game he's playing in. There's no benefit to him being playing with his peers at this point by the looks of it. But I mean, you certainly have to have the questions of can he make something of it, right? I'm going to quickly go through the previous exceptional status players for the CHL, and so John Tavares, I believe, was the first one that they ever had, right? And he was, John Tavares is John Tavares. It's pretty easy to see the career that he's had, but I think there's been 6 players that have been granted the status, and I'll run through them quick, and if you can do it with me, I'll be amazed, because when I was looking this up, I had no idea for a couple of them. So we have John Tavares, Aaron Ekblad, who's obviously just an absolute stud, Connor McDavid, have you heard of him? Sean Day, who is a guy that I had never heard of, honestly, and I had to look him up. Looks like he's playing in the ECHL right now. So, I mean, exceptional status doesn't necessarily grant that you're going to be a surefire shoe-in to be in the NHL. And then, of course, Shane Wright and Joe Veleno. And Shane Wright's still a 16-year-old who's just tearing it up. He just led his team in scoring for the last season. And Joe Veleno, I mean, he's doing okay. It's kind of yet to be seen, right? But for the most part, it does mean that there's a high probability that they're going to be, I mean, just like it says, an absolutely exceptional player.
Yeah, it's no guarantee, you're right. Sean Day is kind of the outlier. I mean, he was a 3rd-round pick by the Rangers in 2016. Veleno at least was a late first-rounder. Yep. Shane Wright, it's still too early to tell with him. I don't even think he's draft eligible until 2022. But that being said, Connor Bedard, I think it says a lot that the Western Hockey League has rejected players. I think they rejected 2 or 3 players in the last couple of years that applied for it, because that's how that works, is you have to go to Hockey Canada. It's a very intense interview process, because it isn't just about how good is the hockey player, but is he going to be mature? Is he going to have the composure to handle the media attention? As we all know, when you're a junior hockey player in Canada, there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of attention on you, especially if you're playing in a smaller town where there's not much going on. And sometimes guys end up in more remote places where they're an instant celebrity. And so for Bedard to earn this, because that's what it is, it's not just given, it's earned. School is still a big factor too. The Canadian Hockey League takes their studies or their students' studies pretty seriously. So there's a certain expectation that he's still going to be a pretty good student as well as an elite hockey player. But just quickly, I just want to run down his numbers here because this blew my mind reading what he did. So plays in a league, it's called the CSSHL. It stands for the Canadian Sports School Hockey League. So basically prep school. 36 games played for the West Van Prep Academy. He had 43 goals, 41 assists for 84 points. The stat that jumped out here was that's the third highest point total ever in the league. The two highest all time were from a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old. Wow. Bedard, as we mentioned, 14 years old. So that's pretty mind-blowing. That's like NHL 20 rookie numbers there. And then he was also the MVP, led the entire league in goals and assists, was the MVP. This kid's numbers, if you go look him up on Elite Prospects, I mean, dude, he played in a tournament, an under 13 tournament. He had 7 games played, 24 goals, 8 assists, 32 points.
It's just too easy for him.
So for all the parents out there that think my kid's the next big thing, unless your kid's putting up 24 goals in 7 games in an international tournament, there's still some work to be done.
So I want to read a quote here from the Regina Pats head scout, who in the Regina Pats obviously have the first pick coming up in the WHL draft. I believe it's on the 23rd of April. And so this guy, he's giving us his 2 cents on Connor Bedard here. His name is Dave McMullen. So he says, "It's a bit of a process for sure. I don't think the special status put our opinion over the top. He's just a real good player. As a young individual, as an athlete, and as a family, it's as good as it gets." And then he goes on to talk about how having Bedard as their first pick is basically a no-brainer. He goes on to say, "That's not to say other players that have been discussed all winter long in the same conversation aren't good players, but this young guy does separate from the pack. He's just a special player. There's not much you can really fault him on. Ultimately, when you build a hockey team, character to me is right at the top of the food chain. This kid is a quality individual. He's pretty humble, and probably that's why he got the exemption to play in the Western Hockey League at 15. He goes on to say, "We look for kids that can skate. That's no issue with this young individual. He has a great hockey mind, good set of hands, can make plays with speed. He's engaged, finishes checks, and sometimes with a purpose, which is surprising for a young guy playing against older players. He moved up to midget prep this season. He has a Western Hockey League shot. He shares the puck. John and I were at a game when he made a great play in overtime. He was in position to shoot, but ultimately passed it to a wide open guy, and the kid put it in for the winner. He's very unselfish. He just has so much positive going for him. Is he going to have some ups and downs? Probably, but we just have to make sure he has at least one player to play with him who thinks the game the same way. The games in the winter, when I watched him, he can make plays where it's just on instinct. Maybe the left winger or right winger is not expecting a pass. Well, you better be ready because that pass might be there." And then he just goes on with more and more superlatives. Like it seems pretty clear that although he may not be a surefire number 1 pick for the NHL, it seems like it's without a shadow of a doubt he's going to go first for the WHL.
Well, just from a business standpoint, okay, yeah, you get a player who's going to be elite. But from a business standpoint, he's going to fill seats in your home arena. Mm-hmm. And because of the fact that he's an underage player, you're getting 1 extra year of him at least. I mean, he's probably going to play 3 years in the Western League if he keeps on this trajectory. It's no doubt he'll be a top pick in 2023 and probably make the jump right away if all kind of goes according to plan here. You're right. It's a no-brainer. And if you haven't seen his highlights, it's kind of interesting because he almost looks like it's too easy. Like he's almost bored out there. Mm-hmm. And he's just kind of coasting around. It kind of looks like he's not doing too much. Then he gets the puck and he makes something out of nothing. And just some of the clips floating around online. And that's the age that we're in. So there's a lot of highlights you can watch. And to your point about the family aspect too, I actually talked to a guy that I used to work with And his son a couple of years ago had played summer roller hockey with Connor Bedard. And I reached out to this guy and I said, hey, anything you can tell me? And he said, well, at the time, Connor was on multiple teams for roller hockey and ice hockey. But he said that the thing that stuck out to him was the parents. He said his dad was super nice. His dad was not the crazy hockey dad that, like I said, thinks his son is going to be the next Sidney Crosby or the next Connor McDavid. He probably knows that, but he just keeps his attitude pretty tempered. And he said his parents were just really polite and really friendly, and they didn't act like their kid was any better. And that goes a long way. I've seen plenty of examples when I played of kids that buckled under the pressure because their parents were over the top, or in some cases, you're hurting your kid. I mean, you're a father yourself, Brandon. You probably can speak to this more, but I'd imagine doesn't matter what it is, if you're telling your kid that they're perfect and they're not making mistakes, they get a little bit too arrogant or a little too cocky, and that hurts them in the long run. So
that's it. Got to keep them grounded. Although, I mean, if I had a Connor Bedard for a kid, I'd be banging on the glass like an orangutan. You'd have to keep me out of there. Like, I don't know how they keep that contained, honestly.
You'd be picking out the color on your Ferrari, like, you know.
Oh, buddy, I'd be writing post-dated checks every day. Like, don't worry, you'll make it up to you.
The Jack Johnson treatment.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think just a big congratulations goes out to Connor Bedard. We're recording this episode on April 14th, but it'll be coming out the day after the draft. But, I mean, I fully expect him to go first overall. Do you have anything else you wanted to add before we sign off here, Ryan?
Congratulations to the Regina Pats.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll have to look into some ice packs for the Giants games to make sure we can get out there and see him.
And hey, if he doesn't get picked first overall, we're just going to delete this episode. So.
Oh, 100%. This is never coming out. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. This has been Brandon and Ryan on the Hockey Minute. We'll catch you next time.
We'd like to take a second and thank you, the listener, for joining us. And a big thanks goes to our writers and production team, Jules, Mark, and Matt. We couldn't do this without you. That's going to do it for us. This is Brandon and Ryan. We'll talk to you next time on the Hockey Minute.